This is IPL season and we are in the middle of IPL 2024, and the biggest controversy that's doing the rounds is the appointment of Hardik Pandya as captain of Mumbai Indians. Now remember, this has caused a lot of heartburn amongst Mumbai Indian faithfuls, a lot of them unhappy with the fact that Hardik Pandya was appointed captain, and has also created a few awkward moments between Rohit Sharma and Hardik Pandya. But this is not the first time such a controversy is playing out in cricket. I'll take you back in this episode of Sports Tale into a controversy that took place about 3 decades ago, involving again two very big personalities in international cricket. I'm talking about Courtney Walsh and Brian Lara, two certified legends, and two legends not just of West Indian cricket but international cricket. So our story actually starts way back in 1996 when Richie Richardson was the captain of West Indies, and that was the time where West Indies cricket was also going through a slump. After Richie Richardson, they were looking for a captain to replace him, and the West Indies board went with the more experienced Courtney Walsh. Now remember, Courtney Walsh at the time was 35 years of age, but murmurs started to surface in West Indian cricket that the new superstar of West Indies, Brian Lara, was eager to become captain. He was in fact lobbying to be given the captaincy, even though Courtney Walsh had been appointed captain. Now those murmurs had begun in West Indies cricket. This had also kind of split the team. Someone else who was an important member of the team that time, in Curtly Ambrose, in fact many years later also went on record to say that Brian Lara was too eager to be captain at the time, which is something that even he didn't like. So clearly pointing out that at the time Brian Lara was wanting to be captain, while Courtney Walsh was doing a rather fine job as captain of the West Indies team. Also the team at that time, majority of the team members also felt that Courtney Walsh was towards the end of his career, and so Brian Lara could have waited. He would have eventually been anyway given the captaincy. There was no need for Brian Lara to rush. Courtney Walsh probably had another couple of years left in his career. So and after that, Brian would become captain. Why was he so eager? And that's where the issue started cropping up. Then in 1997, there was a game, a red stripe game, which is like Ranji Trophy in India, a game that took place in Jamaica, and because news reports were out that Brian Lara is eyeing Courtney Walsh's captaincy. Now you must remember, West Indies, for those of you who don't know, is not one country. It's a collection of different countries, collection of different islands that come together and play international cricket. Now that anyway causes a lot of rivalry within the team, and especially these teams play as countries in their domestic cricket. And so when there was a domestic game between Trinidad, which is where Brian Lara comes from, and Jamaica, which is where Courtney Walsh comes from, there was a domestic game that happened in October of 1997. At that time, there was a hostile Jamaican crowd that turned up to the stadium who weren't happy with Brian Lara wanting to take the captaincy over from Courtney Walsh. So Brian Lara was booed at that time. In fact, Courtney Walsh who was the captain of Jamaica, did not even go out to conduct the toss. That also then added fuel to the fire, where fans believe that Courtney Walsh has not come out because he himself is not very happy with Brian Lara's attitude. Though later, Courtney Walsh would go on and clarify that he was actually in the bathroom at the time when the toss happened, so he sent his deputy. And then when the game started, the crowd were booing Brian Lara, and Brian Lara gets out for a duck in that match, and the crowds go crazy. The situation, was so tense at the time that Brian Lara actually called up the West Indies Cricket Board president to come and tackle the situation. He actually flew in to Jamaica to ensure that the condition at that time was under control and things were calmed down. But that was just the beginning of the controversy. What happens? We are talking about 1997 October when this game happened. What happens 3 months later? Brian Lara, in January of 1998, is given the captaincy of the West Indies team, just as it was being suspected by a lot of fans as well as a lot of players within the West Indian setup. And then, as I said, Courtney Walsh had a decent time as captain, so that also surprised the media. I think the death knell at that time for Courtney Walsh was, even though he had won a lot of series, as a captain. They had lost an away series to Pakistan 3-0 just a short while ago, and that gave the opportunity to the West Indies Cricket Board, who had sided with Brian Lara, to give him the captaincy. And in January of 1998, Courtney Walsh was removed as captain and Brian Lara was made the captain. But the troubles weren't over. It was going to be, another episode in this fracas relationship that the two shared, because the first match and the first series that West Indies were to play under Brian Lara's captaincy was against England. And guess where the first match was? Was back in Jamaica. And just when Brian Lara is getting ready to lead West Indies in the first series versus England, there comes a report that Courtney Walsh may not even be playing that series, that he's contemplating retirement. That was adding more fuel to the fire. Fans were thinking that Courtney is not playing because he is upset. Later though, Courtney Walsh speaks just before the series starts and says that yes, he was not sure of playing because he did not know whether he's still 100%, whether he has it in him to be giving his best to the West Indies, and he was thinking that if he goes on to play and does not perform at the best of his ability, he would be dropped. So to avoid the embarrassment of being dropped, that is why Courtney Walsh started even thinking about not playing the series, and it has nothing to do with Brian Lara. But even despite the clarification, you knew that a hostile reception was awaiting Brian Lara. And the fans turned up in large numbers. They came to Sabina Park hoping to be very hostile towards Brian Lara. But that's where Courtney Walsh plays a very important role. Before the match is to start and the players are coming out after the toss is done for that test match, Courtney Walsh puts an arm around Brian Lara's shoulder and walks out onto the ground, sending a message to the crowd that, listen, there is no animosity, there is no rivalry between us, and he is supporting Brian Lara as captain. He puts his arm around Brian Lara and walks out, and that's where the crowds calm down. So that was Courtney Walsh being the elder statesman. That's where Courtney Walsh, showed his experience and ensured that there was no animosity amongst crowds and that everyone came together and backed the West Indies team. As it turns out, West Indies played that series and eventually won that test series versus England 3-1. And that wasn't the only gesture that Courtney Walsh did. At the end of the series, the sixth test match that West Indies win, there's a very famous photograph of Courtney Walsh lifting Brian Lara from the ground, hugging him and lifting him, celebrating that victory, to tell all the fans and anyone who was taking sides that, listen, we are in this together. From there on, Brian Lara goes on to captain West Indies for 47 test matches. And guess what? He won only 10 of those, losing 26 and drawing 11. Not a great record as captain, as Brian Lara would have later realized. That's something that he was vying for, something that he was desperate to get. That is the West Indies captaincy. Well, it was a crown that did have a lot of thorns in it. So there are a lot of parallels then to the story that's playing out right now between Hardik Pandya and Rohit Sharma, and what happened almost 3 decades ago between two legends of cricket in Brian Lara and Courtney Walsh. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Sports Tale. If you did, do give us a like and share it with your other cricket loving friends.